Ever since the dawn of humankind, we've sought the origins of our life and its purpose. Some have chosen to look to science, religion, or philosophy for answers. Many have turned to the great masters such as Lao Tzu, the Buddha, and Jesus Christ for spiritual illumination. Still others have sought truth through their own direct experience. All of us are searching, knowingly or unknowingly, for enlightenment, truth, and harmony in our lives. This program, hosted by Dr. Gregory Penn, will help you aspire to a more fulfilling and rewarding life.
Welcome to this edition of Aspire Unplugged. We're going to look a little bit today at what it means to let go, enter into a practice. I'm here with my director, producer, friend, Mitch Murbach, and he's got some questions that some of you have asked.
Great. Let's start out with this question from a student. They say, I am surrounded by and swim in emotions via all media. How can I live free from them? So let's take a look at your response in this clip from the Beatitudes.
I have to see that I have to make restitution for the things I've done in my life. What does that look like? I have to be kind. I have to be patient. I have to be willing to do those things for others that I need for myself. It's what Gandhi said. We have to be the change we want to see in the world. I have to be willing to make the changes I need within myself that would free me from my emotionality, from my guilt, my shame, my fear. And any chance I have to be remorseful, any way, shape, and form, to go out of my way in a remorseful way to help someone, to understand that I am helping them. And the reason I am helping them is not to be a goody two-shoes, but to change my energy, the level of my energy and what's emitting out of me, to change the quality of where I'm living and live in consciousness rather than in the conscience that makes me feel like guilt and shame is the only way. That's way beyond the average person's pay grade. Okay, just not going to happen.
Okay.
So what was the question again? I want you to state it again the way you did.
All right.
Do you remember?
Yeah, the student says they were surrounded by and swim in emotions via all media.
Okay, so there's an old Henny Youngman joke, and I use it all the time with my students. Henny Youngman was, do you remember who he was? A comedian. Yeah. He was playing the violin. You know, he's in the 40s and the 50s. And he says, he went to his doctor. He said, Doc, it hurts when I do that. And the doctor says, don't do that. It's that simple.
Right.
Why are you listening to media? What is your obsession? The reason you're swimming in all this crap is because you're obsessed and compulsed. You know, you watch people on their devices. They live on them.
Yeah.
And it has caused people, and I often wonder if Steve Jobs had known, you know, in a moment, that you introduced this iPhone this morning. You know, I was there when he did it, and at Macworld, and he said this is a groundbreaker, a game changer, I think he called it. I wonder if somebody had come to him and said, look, if you do this, you're going to ruin a whole generation.
All of humanity.
and because they can't handle it. They'll become obsessed, compulsed.
Yeah.
I wonder what he would have done. And I know the answer. He would have said, well, somebody's going to do it eventually, so it might as well be me.
Right.
And that attitude that we have in America, that's our attitude for our evil.
Well, you were an early adopter of technology and iPhones and all things Apple. How do you sort that out in your practice?
I'm not on social media at all. And I try to low profile on all of that kind of stuff. I use it for work. It's how my students get a hold of me if there's an emergency. It's how you called me this morning. You know, it was very helpful. I use it as a tool, but not as a lifestyle. And I think a lot of people use it as a lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you go any place and you have to wait for longer than 30 seconds. Everybody's out on their phone doing whatever they do. They don't talk to each other.
No.
They don't even make eye contact with each other.
They don't know how to be with each other. The phone gives them that space, that hidden space where they can have their private thoughts and reactions and then da-da-da. But let's talk about the whole idea of a spiritual, getting involved and letting go. And that's what we wanted to work on, swimming in the emotions, which simply means that I'm obsessed and compulsed. I've got to do something there that, here's another reason why so many people can't do it. It's basically because they can't do any self-examination. It's impossible. And the minute that what they hear with self-examination is self-criticism. And we hear about this thing, critical thinking now. That's baloney. You know, we need awareness. You can sit there and nitpick at your thoughts forever. What are you going to come up with?
Would you say that that's coming from fear as well?
Well, yeah.
They don't want to face what's going on in their
prejudice, bias,
Yeah.
and then they start to get a feel for what their genetic heritage is, even though they don't know they're getting that. And then the next thing, you know, they can't focus or concentrate, they can't meditate because they can't watch their breath for very long, or they can't even ingest a tone that would awaken them, and they can't do it. And so the process there is very difficult. You know, we're not built for awakening. We're built for survival and sex. That's what we're built for.
So say somebody gets the spark and they want to make the first step.
Well, let's
What do
say
they
they
need to do?
get curious. Okay? So if they get curious, then they go and they look at all the famous gurus, you know, the Tolles, the Deepak Chopras, all the ones. And
Well, you traveled all the way to India to do that.
I know, but it was different. They were awakened masters. Deepak is not, I call him Deepak, it's because that's what one of his friends, anyway, we won't get into that. Deepak people think of in this country as being the guy. And then you have the Dalai Lama, who I don't really think, you know, you can't hand down awakening, and he's not. And then you have Tolle, which, you know, he has all the words in the right place, but he's not there. He's not there. Everybody thinks he is, at least Oprah does. And so they start going for the big ones. They don't understand it's the ones that are hidden, the teachers that are hidden that are hard to find, really hard to find. And they're the ones, the journey to that teacher is the first part of your journey to awaken. What are you going through? Are you consistent? Are you willing to overcome all the things that are difficult to find that teacher? Like I did in Lawrence, Kansas, finding my first Zen master. That was a real feat. Who would have thought there would even be one there?
I know.
I know.
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of work. That's part of the journey. And then, of course, along with that, they have that. If they have a spark, just a spark, then they have to consider what's the cost of being in this kind of thing. What am I going to suffer from? Because you're not going to go into the normal world. You know, you're going to see people interacting and you're going to realize, my God, I do that. That's how it looks. You go into third person, you start realizing, oh, this is something that was handed down to me. Why? When I was a little boy, I'll tell you this story real quick. I was deeply concerned about myself. And my concern basically was, why do I have the thoughts I have? Everybody seems to have better thoughts than me. I thought everybody was smarter than me. And it worried me. How come I can only have these thoughts and they have those thoughts? And how come I can't think their thoughts?
Wow.
I'd be playing baseball and this would come over me. And I would just walk away, you know.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the game and just go home and sit there. I had a little fort in my garage. And I would just sit there and wonder, why can't I think like other people? Why are my thoughts the only thoughts I can have?
So you knew you were separate from something at that time.
I
mean, you were clearly
I felt
searching.
inferior. Yeah, I felt deeply inferior. And I wondered, then it turned into, when I got a little older, I started to realize everybody has their own thoughts, and they are not to be compared. And if you compare them, you become vain and bitter. And that's where that spark happens and the journey begins. When you're looking at that and you're not judging your own thoughts and thinking, well, his or her thoughts are better than mine.
That's so weird. I wonder, you obviously at a young age had those thoughts. I mean, I think that feels weird to me that you had that. Do you think that perhaps you had that vision, or you were having those thoughts because you were reincarnated from already being where you are now, maybe, and you were just rediscovering it?
That could have been very, very true. I used to go to my mother and say, why can't I have the same thoughts as everybody else? Why am I stuck with these? And she looked at me, and this will tell you how my mother was, and my father. Oh, Greg, it'll pass. Go on. She didn't sit down with me and say, well, tell me what you're concerned about.
But get dressed, we're going to Unity Church.
Right. Get dressed, we're going to church.
Yeah.
And I'd be sitting there. And I'd talk to the minister. I remember him, Wendell Mixon. I'll never forget him. Loved him dearly. And he'd go, well, Greg, you got a lot of interesting thoughts. I don't know why you think the way you do. At least he was honest,
Maybe you should see a doctor.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, they're a psychiatrist or something, but nobody even bothered to take me there.
Yeah.
So I struggled with that all through my teens, too. I always thought everybody else was smarter than me. And that hit a chord with me as I went on, and I started to realize there are things that you need to do if you're going to work on awakening, and it can't be critical of yourself. You can't be critical of that doesn't work. And that's what I talked about in the clip there. You can't feel guilty and ashamed and bad about what you are or who you are at the time, because that changes with the chemistry. So the little boy that was worried about his thoughts is not the same person as the man here at 71 years old. That's a lot of years behind. How did I get here? And you look at it and you think, maybe I shouldn't be thinking at all. And that's when it dawns on you. Maybe it's not about thinking at all. And it isn't.
Okay, so a student gets the spark.
Yeah.
And then they want to know, well, how long is this going to take?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Where are we going anyway?
How long does this take and how much is it going to cost me? Yeah. Do I have to keep making these damn donations, these apps with, how much for enlightenment, that kind of thing. I had a guy who was very wealthy. He said, I'll write you a check for the whole thing. How much? Just tell me how much it'll be and when I'm going to get enlightened.
Wow.
I excused him from the office. I said, you're go home. This isn't it.
Well, why not? I can buy everything else. Why can't I buy enlightenment?
And he tried to. And it didn't work, of course. And he died a very sad death. And I did his funeral. And, reminded me of Morty. My story of Morty.
Oh, I remember that.
Remember Morty?
Uh-huh.
Reminded me of that story. Morty was my first wife's uncle or somebody like that in his family, and he had all of the junkyards in Kansas City. He owned them all.
Wow.
And he made a mint, doing it. And then one day Morty keeled over and died at 35 years old.
Oh.
And the rabbi was doing the funeral, and I loved this rabbi. I mean, I just loved him. This is where chutzpah was born in Greg. He said, Morty reminds me of the man who went to the czar and said, I want all the land I can walk in a day. Okay? And the czar said, fine, you can have all the land you walk in a day. At the end of the day, drop dead.
So how much land did he got?
He didn't have nothing.
He only got 6 feet.
He got 6 feet. That's all Morty ever got.
Oh, man.
And I think that, when you understand there's no shortcut. When a person enters into a practice, I'm going to be serious, you have to wade through your karma. The self-examination is about saying, why is it things can only be the way they are for me? What is it about me that brought me here? What is it about me that makes my life possible? That's the questions you need to ask before you can take it seriously. And when you see what you've assumed and have been taught to assume about your life, like, what you give is what you get, that's not true either. That people are basically bad, or that you're basically bad, you're evil, you're sinner, things like that. Or it's not going to turn out well, nothing ever turns out well. Well, a lot of that is factual. It is. You can't take it to heart. You have to have a heart. You have to discover your heart. Inner work depends on finding your authentic heart. And if you don't find your authentic heart, then it's just philosophy, religion, and being rudimentary about whatever you do. Like I meditate from this to that, I don't eat meat, things like that.
Well, let's talk about karma for a second then.
Okay.
As part of letting go, shedding your karma.
Yes, it is. A lot of it is shedding my karma, but it's also using my karma as the great teacher of my life.
Well, yeah, if it's your karma, right, eventually it's going to push you toward where you're trying to go. Because that's your karma.
That's exactly true. What you're saying is exactly true. And people don't take that into account, but they've got to see, it's my karma to live in this falderall, these constant mistakes in living in a kind of a utopia of thinking that I'm lesser than or better than. It can be a utopia. Once you start to see that, and you go, I don't need to do that anymore, and then you start understanding how things are happening, and you are correct. Karma's there to help me, not to punish me. It's to push me along. And when I'm no longer interpreting my karma, but following it, then it becomes profound. And I don't live in these little cul-de-sacs of self-criticism all the time. Everyone is there, every person we meet in every moment, the crew here, you, me, everybody is there to help us with our karma, to push us forward.
So it's key to try to find what it is they're trying to show us and why they're in our life, and take whatever lesson is coming from them, would you say?
What is it in, there are two questions with that. What is it in me that made you possible? That's a big one. And then the second one, which nobody wants to ask, what do I put you through in order to love me? Nobody wants this. Couples will, fight, and they'll have all these difficulties, but they don't want to ask the question. I've done a lot of marital counseling in my day, and it's futile. But they, I'll do this, you do that, we have a business deal, and da-da-da-da. But really, the question is, what do I put you through to love me?
Okay, so how do you take then and try to figure that out? Do you meditate on that?
Could.
I mean, or do you just try to clear your mind?
Could.
And see what comes of it?
Could.
Okay.
You'd have to be very, very, very open and honest with yourself. That's self-examination. And people don't want to, everybody has a thought about what they are and an emotion about what they are, And that's what that question was about. I'm wrapped up in emotions and a swirl. Once you come to a conclusion, and we talked about this in an earlier show here, once a person's come to a conclusion about who and what they are, game over. Game over. And all they're trying to do is live to prove what they think about themselves is true, instead of finding out what is authentic, which is love. And it isn't their human nature. It isn't. But how do you tell someone that lives their life for social media and hate. What is social media but passing on hate? Because that's the sapien. Read Homo Deus. Read Sapiens. Read Robert Sapolsky's work, Behave. Read it. I think every kid starting from junior high, 7th grade up, would have to read at least Homo Deus and Sapiens. And by the time they're a senior.
Wow, okay.
Because they have all this, reading, writing, and arithmetic in their brain, but they have no humanity. They don't understand humanity. And then to take it further, they don't understand what transcending that might be like. We're not here to just stay human. Nothing. We live in impermanence. Everything's changing. And this impermanence is a gift. We don't like it. I don't like it the Chargers left San Diego. That's impermanence, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things, I joke about it with my students. I'm old, I don't have the energy I used to have. I have my Rasha that I used to teach, but, I get up in the morning at 1:30 in the morning, I meditate, and I go to work, and I'm at work by 2:30. And that is my shtick. And I don't waver from it 7 days a week. And people aren't going to do that. They're not going to, I want to sleep in. I got a wife. I got a husband. I got kids,
I got to post updates on my Facebook
on my
account.
yeah.
It's a huge wedge.
Yeah, it's a huge wedge. Our lifestyle isn't built for awakening. It's built for survival and sex. Those two things. We didn't get a blue pill for love, did we? Or forgiveness? We got a blue pill for erections.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're onto something there.
Yeah.
Why don't you let's develop that.
Yeah.
Are you listening, Pfizer?
Yeah, Pfizer, where are you?
Jeez.
Yeah, that's the deal. I know this all sounds fatalistic, and it is. And I don't know what we'll come to. I don't know. I don't know.
There needs to be more voices like Aspire.
But what good would it do when you don't have an audience?
Yeah.
I don't have an audience anymore. The truth of the matter is, the reason this is the last program, is I really don't have an audience anymore. They're off doing other things. YOLOs are huge. You only live once. All this stuff that Greg talks about.
Bucket list.
Yeah, bucket list, and it doesn't matter. I don't have an audience anymore. When I was in the 80s and 90s, I had an audience. But those people have either died or handed their life over to their children or thought, I listened to Greg for 20 years and I couldn't get it, so what the hell? I'm going to drop it.
I got to think that, as you said, someone is out there looking for their master or looking for that. And eventually, maybe it's after you're gone, they're going to find some of this content, and it's going to do the trick for them.
That would be my greatest glory, is to think that even when I'm gone, these programs would inspire somebody to go forward. That what a legacy that would be for me. Yeah.
I don't think you have to worry about that.
I don't know.
We got more good content coming up for you next episode. Please tune in.
Please. Namaste.
Namaste.